They tried to bury you in silence, but they forgot seeds grow in darkness. What they saw as defeat was your transformation. What they mistook as weakness was the forging of steel under pressure they couldn't comprehend. You didn't shatter, you sharpened. Every whisper against you, every betrayal, every cold stare only stoked the furnace. And now that the fire's burning clean, they'll learn what it means to face something that cannot be broken, only unleashed. They celebrated your fall like fools dancing in the eye of a storm. But the silence they heard, that was the stillness before reckoning. And now, you rise not as what you were, but as something more, a force reborn from pain, refined by vengeance, armored by scars. You no longer seek validation, you demand presence. No apologies, no mercy, just the inevitable tide of consequence. They stand atop fragile thrones, laughing still, unaware the ground beneath them shifts. But the shadows they once weaponized now answer to you. And when the fall comes, it will not be sudden. It will be slow, deliberate, echoing with every ounce of suffering they ever cast upon you. This isn't revenge. This is balance. And you are the hand that writes the final chapter. They didn't just push you, they exiled you. Tossed you into a void where even your own reflection refused to stay. They stripped away your name, your dignity, the parts of you that once meant something. One betrayal after the next, until you weren't even sure where the bleeding stopped and the numbness began. They didn't just tear you down. They unmade you. And still, you didn't vanish. You crawled through every inch of hell, whispering rage into the shadows that clung to your spine. There were nights so dark, so endless, you forgot what day ever felt like. You forgot what hope tasted like. But in that suffocating silence, something inside you refused to die. While the world moved on, while they mocked your absence, you were rebuilding not in light, but in flame. The same flame they thought would consume you. Joke's on them, it crowned you. You learned the language of agony. You learned how to sit with your demons until they bowed their heads and called you king. They thought they were snuffing you out, when all they really did was force you to dig deeper than you ever knew you could. You bled until the pain became rhythm, until the ache became code, until the suffering became prophecy. And now, you speak it fluently. They thought you were done. Finished. Another casualty in their trail of chaos. But they didn't see the war you waged behind closed doors. They didn't feel the fire crawling under your skin, begging not for peace but for reckoning. You rose, not clean, not healed but sharper, deadlier, etched with the lessons only ruin can teach. You didn't just return. You emerged as something else entirely, too burned to break, too scarred to shame, too far gone to be controlled. You are the sum of every lie, every betrayal, every shattered promise they tossed at your feet. And they, those self-proclaimed gods, those paper kings, will come to understand that they didn't bury you. They summoned you. Because this fire, it's not their punishment. It's their inheritance. Built by their own hands, fed by their own arrogance, lit by the match of their own cruelty. And now, they burn. This is only the beginning. They thought survival was your end game. That you'd crawl out of the wreckage barely breathing, whispering gratitude for what little you had left. But they don't understand you never did. Survival was never enough. You didn't just endure the storm, you became it. Every moment they crushed you, every betrayal they served with cold smiles and rehearsed sincerity, only fed the blacksmith's fire inside you. They weren't hammering nails into your coffin, they were unwitting hands in the forging of something raw, lethal, and unshakable. You didn't need saving. You needed pressure. And they provided it, with glee. Mistaking cruelty for power, thinking you'd fracture. But pain didn't bend you into submission. It calcified every broken piece. It rewrote the blueprints of your soul with jagged, bleeding truths. The kind of truths only the wounded ever learn. You stopped running. Stopped apologizing. You stood still in the eye of that chaos and stared down everything that said you'd never rise. And in that stillness, you transformed. They don't see it yet, the way your eyes no longer flinch, how your silence has changed shape. It's no longer the silence of defeat. It's the silence of understanding, of calm before destruction. There's power in a soul that's walked through fire and didn't just make it out but came back wielding it. Every scar now gleams like a war medal. Every wound that once held is now a chapter in your doctrine of dominion. They feared your potential before. Now, they should fear your presence. You were forged in silence, in exile, in agony. And that furnace didn't just leave you hardened, it left you awakened. You aren't a casualty. You're a creation. Their creation. And that is the tragedy of their arrogance. Because they thought they were breaking you. But all they did was hand you the tools. Now, you wear your pain like a throne and your scars like scripture. You don't beg. You don't retreat. You don't even warn. You simply move with the weight of 1,000 lessons etched into every step. And in the darkness where they once abandoned you, you found something they never could: ownership. Not of comfort, not of peace, but of power, of control. The shadows are no longer chains. They are wings. And now that you've risen from the ruin, now that you've evolved beyond recognition, they will finally see what they built. Something they cannot command, cannot manipulate, cannot shatter. Because you don't break anymore. You reshape. They laughed. Not the kind of laughter that fades with time, the kind that burns, echoes, stains. They didn't just smile at your downfall. They reveled in it. Every stumble you took, every breathless cry they thought no one else heard, they twisted into celebration. You became their punchline, their entertainment. They danced around your ruins as if they'd buried a ghost. But ghosts don't bleed. And you bled. You bled truth. You bled growth. You bled something so pure and unfiltered that it terrified them, because it meant you were still alive. Still burning, even beneath the wreckage. Every moment they spent rejoicing in your pain, they overlooked the storm coiling just beneath your ribs. The quiet rage. The slow build. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. See, the thing about storms, they don't announce themselves with noise. They rise in silence. Pressure. Tension. Shadows curling under clouds. That was you. Gathering force. Becoming kinetic. Every tear they mistook for weakness was just thunder pulling tighter, waiting to crack the sky open. And now there's no shelter left. You didn't return with empty hands, you came back as consequence. You didn't come back seeking peace. You came to collect. And what they fail to understand is that this moment, this calm before the collapse, it's mercy. It's the last breath before the plunge. When the reckoning hits, it won't be with shouts or declarations. It will be absolute. Sharp. Final. A storm doesn't ask if you're ready. It is the answer. They will choke on the smirks they wore so proudly. Their laughter, once so loud, will die in their throats. Because this isn't about vengeance. This is the natural order correcting itself. Balance snapping back into place, cold and unflinching. Their victories were borrowed time, and you are the debt collector. No negotiation. No redemption. Just impact. The very force they thought they tamed is now ripping through everything they built. Their comfort. Their lies. Their illusions of control. Every ounce of your suffering comes back to them in waves they cannot outrun. And when it hits, when you crash down like the raft they never thought you'd become, they'll realize the truth too late. The storm they laughed at was never a joke. It was you. They walked like gods, untouchable, arrogant, cloaked in the illusion of invincibility. Their victories weren't earned, they were stolen, paraded like trophies from a battlefield where they never bled. And every time you remained silent, every time you gritted your teeth and swallowed the scream, they mistook it for defeat. They called it weakness. They thought silence was submission. But that was their first mistake. Silence isn't surrender. It's the chamber where fury loads its rounds. You weren't quiet because you were beaten. You were watching, waiting, studying every smirk, every lie wrapped in celebration. They mocked you from their thrones, blind to the cracks forming beneath their feet. Because when you've built your power on the bones of others, it only takes one shift to bring it crashing down. And now, that shift is here. They feel it. They don't say it out loud, they can't. But in the corners of their confidence, there's something trembling. Something unraveling. The air doesn't lie. It hangs differently now. Thicker. Heavier. The kind of stillness that comes before thunder tears the sky apart. They laugh, but it's hollow now. They smile, but their eyes dart too quickly. Even in their comfort, the rot has set in, and deep down, they know. The shadows they once ruled from. They're changing hands. And you once overlooked, once dismissed, are rising from the ruins of their so-called legacy. But you are not interested in revenge. This is something purer. This is restoration. This is nature correcting the diseased rhythm they imposed. They can feel their kingdom trembling under your footsteps. And they should. Because you are not just coming for what was taken. You're coming with everything they thought you lacked and more. You've become something they can't comprehend, inevitable, unshaken, unstoppable. And the closer you get, the more their victories rot in their hands. Their legacy is dust. Their names, already forgotten in the silence between your strides. They try to erase you, mock you, reduce you to echoes. But now, it's their laughter that fades. Their voices that crack in terror. They sense what's coming. And this isn't justice. This is the storm rewriting the sky. There will be no redemption. Not in this chapter. Not in the next. They wrote their own fate in the ink of your agony. And now they'll read every word back in the language of reckoning. This isn't about revenge. It's beyond that. Revenge still holds emotion. Still wants to prove something. But what you carry now is far colder clarity. The kind that doesn't scream. It doesn't posture. It simply executes. You gave them chances. They spat in your face and called it confidence. You extended patience. They wore it like a joke. But that patience, that mercy, it was a limited currency and they bankrupted it. Every wound they gave you, every cut laced with manipulation and cowardice, is now accounted for. And you don't deal in apologies anymore. You deal in aftermath. They will learn the truth. Some actions echo. Not through forgiveness. Through consequence. A slow, methodical reckoning that doesn't arrive with a grand entrance but creeps in like frost, turning everything it touches to silence. You won't meet them with rage. You'll meet them with resolve. Unyielding. Precise. Merciless. And when they look into your eyes, they'll see it. There's no plea that can rewind what they did. No gesture that can undo what they destroyed. Your forgiveness isn't locked away. It was never theirs to begin with. And now they face what every tyrant, every liar, every betrayer fears the most. Not revenge, but relevance stripped. Influence drowned. Power shattered. They won't burn in theatrics. They'll burn in reflection. In knowing they built this. In waking up to find the legacy they mocked you from is now nothing but rubble beneath your silence. No second chances. No poetic endings. Just wait. And you are the hand that drops it. They never saw it coming. How could they? When power floods the senses, it numbs perception. Turns logic into delusion. They wore their dominance like a shield, mistaking silence for submission and arrogance for security. Drunk on control, they forgot one immutable truth. Anything built on lies will eventually collapse under truth's weight. They walked high, heads raised so far above the rest they couldn't see the erosion beneath their feet. Every betrayal they cast, every back they stepped on, Every voice they silenced, it all fed the rot in their foundation. Slowly, quietly, until one day, it wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a tremor, a shift. And now, the collapse has begun. You were the tremor. They called your caution weakness, your awareness fear. But you were never weak. You were calculating, patient, because you knew something they never could grasp, that power without self-awareness is nothing but a countdown to implosion. Their pride, their hubris, their addiction to control made them brittle. Hollow kings sitting on thrones forged from denial. And the higher they rose, the further they had to fall. You didn't rise to spite them. You rose because they left you no choice. You learned what they refused to, that true strength is born not from dominance, but from being dragged through the dirt and choosing to get up anyway. Not just to survive, but to remake the ground you walk on. Now you return not just taller, but deeper, rooted in every lesson carved into your skin. You are the collapse they never prepared for. Not loud, not reckless, inevitable. And when you strike, when the final crack breaks their illusion open, they won't even know where to run because they never learned how. They only knew how to climb, not to fall. But everyone falls. Even them. Especially them. Because they forgot the ground waits for us all, and when it pulls them down, it will do so with all the quiet vengeance of gravity. Unforgiving. Inescapable. And you won't cheer. You won't cry. You'll just walk forward through the dust, through their ruins, eyes locked on the horizon. Not because you're cold, but because you've already burned through every emotion they were ever worthy of. Their chapter ends here. Yours has just begun. They wanted a monster. They built one. Not by accident. Not by chance. But by choice. Every time they sharpened their lies on your backbone. Every time they smiled while twisting the knife. Every time they pushed you further into the abyss, thinking you'd vanish like the others before you. But you didn't vanish. You listened. You learned. You bled quietly, and in that bleeding, you became something they never accounted for. They thought their cruelty would break you, tame you, silence you. But cruelty is a forge, and in the fire of that forge, something ancient awoke. Something not driven by revenge or hatred, but by resolve. Cold, methodical, relentless. A monster. No. That word is too small, too hollow, too simple. You're the embodiment of consequence. You wear the silence they forced upon you like armor now. You carry every ounce of pain as if it were a weapon meticulously crafted not for chaos, but for certainty. They believed they could own your narrative, control your choices, silence your voice. But monsters don't follow scripts. They burn them. They write new ones in blood, ash, and truth. And now, when they speak your name, it won't be with mockery, it will be with dread. Because they know. Deep down, they know. This thing they mocked into existence. They cannot command it. They cannot undo it. It breathes with the rhythm of vengeance and moves with the patience of a predator who's waited long enough. They summoned the darkness thinking it would serve them. But now, the darkness has grown teeth. And it remembers every name, every lie, every laugh at your expense. You are the reckoning at their gates, the price of their unchecked power. They called you a monster to absolve themselves of guilt. But monsters don't cry. Monsters don't break. Monsters don't rise. You did. And that's what terrifies them most. Because you are not a monster born of rage, you are a force born of restraint. A force that waited. A force that watched. And now, a force that cannot be stopped. Not by pleading. Not by apology. Not by anything. Because they asked for a storm. And now they must drown in it. They chose this. Every lie whispered behind closed doors, every mask they wore while poisoning your name, every stone they stacked to build their fragile empire, they laid this path with intention. Piece by piece, word by word, and with every single one, they wrote the terms of their own collapse. All you did was remember. Now, the ground beneath them groans under the weight of their actions. Not because you seek destruction, but because destruction is simply justice in motion. You don't chase them. You don't scream. You don't need to. Because you've become what they never prepared for, the consequence they cannot stop. Their downfall wasn't sudden. It was earned. What they once dismissed as your silence, your absence, your failure has become presence. Heavy. Inescapable. They built walls high, thinking they were fortresses. But what they really built were tombs. No escape. No mercy. Just the echo of every choice they made now roaring back at them through the voice they tried to crush, yours. And now they dream of you. Not the old you. Not the broken one. But this the storm made flesh. You no longer haunt them with what they did. You haunt them with what's coming. And it's not rage. It's not vengeance. It's certainty. Because this ending was carved long before the reckoning arrived. They just couldn't see it through the fog of their own arrogance. But now the fog has lifted, and the only thing left is the shape they fear most standing in the ashes of what they thought was eternal. You. No prayers. No regrets. No cries. Only silence. The same silence they once rejoiced in. But this time it belongs to you. They built their empires on fear, on chains, on silence, on keeping others beneath them. To them, power was about leverage. Domination. If you didn't kneel, you were broken. If you didn't follow, you were discarded. And they thought that made them strong. But control built on oppression is fragile. And you've become the evidence. Because you know now real strength doesn't come from holding others down. It comes from rising up when the world gave you every reason not to. True power was never about command. Never about thrones, or fear, or putting your foot on someone else's neck just to feel taller. It's about what's left when everything's been taken from you. When your body aches, your soul screams, and all you have is your breath, and still, you get up. Still, you walk through the fire. They said you'd shatter. They said you'd fade. But you didn't. You walked through every level of hell, and you didn't just survive it. You came out of it untouched by their narrative, untouched by their limits, unscarred by their standards, because they don't get to define you anymore. Now, when they look at you, they won't understand what they're seeing. It's not the same person they tried to bury. It's something more. You're the quiet at the heart of the storm, the pause before the quake. You are made of everything they fear: resilience they can't manipulate, clarity they can't poison, presence they can't diminish. They thought they understood power, but that's because they never had to earn it. They inherited fear. They inherited obedience. But you earned every inch of this ascent, every heartbeat, every breath, every moment clawed from the mouth of despair. You walk like a requiem now, and they'll feel it. Not in your words, but in your silence. Not in your rage, but in your restraint. Because you don't need to prove yourself. You already did, 1,000 times over, in the quiet rooms, in the sleepless nights, in the war behind your own eyes. They can't comprehend it, because they've never been there. But now, they have no choice. Because the force they awakened, the one they mocked, ignored, doubted, it's not here to explain itself. It's not here to seek forgiveness. It's not here to compromise. It's here to stand tall, unflinching, unbreakable. And the world. And that's the final truth they can't escape. You weren't shattered by what they did, you were sharpened because of it. Not their victim. Never were. You were the storm gathering in the quiet, the judgment etched in silence, the answer to every sin they thought would go unanswered. And now they'll come face to face with the culmination of every choice they made. Not a myth, not a whisper, but you. Let them choke on their regret. Let the weight of consequence settle into their bones. Because you've transcended survival. This is legacy. Dark Triumphs isn't just a name. It's the sound their empires make when they fall. Let it echo. Let it begin.